It's episode 117. We're going to talk about the equity framework, our inability to approve a calendar in this council, and a hotel uptown.
Welcome to episode 117, R&D in the QC. We promised we'd be more frequent, and it's been 6 weeks or so. That's more frequent,
right? Yeah,
it had been
2 weeks,
8 months,
6.
So we'll see. We're getting a little better.
First segment, Larken, the one I promised you. We're going to do dad jokes. You can't laugh. Can't laugh. Ready?
Not laughing at you is one of the things I'm best at.
I mean, you got to laugh if it's funny, but you're not supposed to. Okay. Did you hear about the kidnapping at the school? It's fine. He woke up. Why can't you hear a pterodactyl using the bathroom? The P is silent. How do you find Will Smith in the snow?
Jokes that you already know.
How do you find Will Smith in the snow? These are funny. You have to follow the Fresh Prince. You're just not funny. Hey, have you heard the new movie about, it's called Constipation? Yes or no?
No.
Oh, that's because it hasn't come out yet. You're the worst.
Well, that went well.
Okay.
All right. That's about as funny as anything you ever say.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. So now our new framework that we've just decided upon, which is I'm on the inside and you're on the outside like a normal human reading the paper. And we're going to talk about some stuff that maybe you weren't part of the deep, painful conversations of what is turning into one of the most painful terms on council I think I've had. And that's saying a lot. So first up, equity framework. What do you know?
From outside looking in, now, I will say this. I know I saw, because one of your colleagues, one of my former colleagues, sent out an email on their campaign email list with a timestamp to go look at the video, and it kind of framed it as an us versus them type of thing. And so I went and looked, and I saw your comments, Ed Driggs's comments, and Victoria Watlington's comments about this framework. Now, what I will say is, having been on the inside before, one of the things that gives this some credence in my mind, the work that is that Federico Rios was involved in it, who I think is a rock star. I think he's doing really good work at the city. So I'm inclined to think that there's some substance to it, and it's not simply just a resolution. But as
you'd be wrong. You'd be wrong in that case.
Well, but are they saying that this is the end of the work, or is this the beginning of the work?
Oh, no, of course not. Nobody would be, I mean, they're sophisticated enough to know to say, this is just the beginning of a long journey. Where my problem lies, and I think, you'd hopefully agree with this, is too often people want to take the victory lap and get the headline and say, look, we did it. And sometimes that's all right. Right. But there has to be a little something there. And in this case, I've had, and I didn't just kind of soapbox behind the dais. I had a working session with Federico and the team where we went in and I was like, look, let's have a debate on it. Challenge my assumptions. And in the end of the day, it's just, I mean, it's essentially like a flow chart of this is city government and this is city staff and this is constituents. And then there's a list of 6 questions that are distilled down from 30 plus pages of the study that start with like, what are you trying to achieve? And end with, is equity considered in that? And my thing is that is not a framework, first and foremost. And secondly, like, we need a real framework. I believe in this work thoroughly. And I do believe that the greatest threat to achieving equity is in falsely diagnosing disparity. And right now, the problem in this council is not, do we remember to bring up equity? We bring it up all the time, way too often. And what that sometimes happens when there's real disparity, when there's real inequity, it's kind of like, the boy that cried wolf, and it just gets drowned out in all the noise. And that's the real problem.
The greatest threat to your angle on that debate is, and I know you agree with me on this, so I'm not pointing the finger at you because you didn't do this, but when the counter argument to should we be doing more to consider equity, when the counter argument is, well, that was way back in history, and like we're past that now and all that stuff, that's not great either. And like to act like suddenly because we've made some progress that there's like not disparity and there's not racism. And again, you didn't do that. but there were comments made and are frequently comments made in these conversations as if somehow we've moved beyond race and it doesn't impact people's lives anymore and there's not bias and all that stuff. And so that was
I can
part of that conversation.
understand some of those angles. I'm not saying I'm on that page. I'm not saying that's the argument I take, but there's probably some poorly articulated points buried in there somewhere. But the broader point is that angle has been debated and perfected and fought over time. And if you're in urban America and you go down that path, whether you're right or wrong doesn't even matter. You're absolutely going to lose.
It does matter. I mean, the idea that someone could be right by trying to act like racism doesn't exist anymore, or that black people aren't frequently at a disadvantage in this country. It's now your point is not everything is biased.
And that's where I think the crux is of the problem.
To act like the opposite is true and that nothing is biased and nothing is racist is absurd as well. So
yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah,
I think totally that I don't know. I mean, I think it's tough. I mean, and we got into, I'm on the CRVA board now, which I know you're going to talk about something else related to that here in a minute, but there was a conversation on our board about how we make sure that the minority business-owned enterprises are getting, a fair shake at opportunities. Now, they just did a big vendor fair, had a bunch of people come in, and were able to learn about the opportunities that the CRV has to work with the city. But we know that a lot of those businesses that get those women and minority business contracts, we know a lot of those are white women. And I know you and I both know people who have put ownership of a company in a spouse's name and things like that to make them eligible for these sorts of contracts and opportunities. So
yeah, so that's wrong every single time. But there's a lot of white women. Are we also claiming that there is no inequity for white women-owned businesses in this world anymore?
There's things where if I'm a black small business owner in this community, and this actually I think underscores your point, is people just are looking for a way to declare victory for political purposes, and they go, we've upped our achievement on, MWSBEs. Well, let's break that down. If most of that is just going to affluent white women, yes, we should be doing business with women-owned businesses. But then some politicians holding up a stat that says, look how much we've increased MWSBE, but very little of that's going to black or Hispanic-owned businesses or Asian-owned businesses.
Yeah, but see, so this rounds out this topic right here, because we haven't had a pod since like the last disparity study that we accepted, and we're heading towards adopting that. And some of the stuff with the procurement issue that's happened. All these stories in my mind are all part of this same narrative right now. And so I fought vehemently against what I saw. I went and broke down the disparity study. And again, for those who don't follow that, every couple years in the cycle, we're required by law to go through and see if a disparity still exists in the way that we dole out city money to contractors, to companies, to different initiatives, to see if there's an inherent or implicit bias in who we're giving the money to. And by federal law, everybody has to do this across the country, because you're not just allowed to award people that aren't the lowest bidder unless you've defined a real disparity. And the problem is the numbers you can present numbers any way you want. They presented numbers back to us that when I went into the weeds of it, I realized 12% or so of the businesses that were there and the money that was deployed went to minority-owned businesses. Of that, 2.5% of the money went to black-owned businesses. But there were only 2% of black businesses that were in the universe to give that money to. So in reality, we overclocked, we overpaid for the percentage of businesses that were black-owned for the amount of money we gave them. Now, that means one clear thing to me. There is no inherent or implicit bias and disparity in how we give money out. Now, I could make the argument very easily. There is a disparity or inequity in the number of black-owned businesses in this space or in this vertical versus that, but that's not government's problem to solve. Our problem is to make sure those that are there and they have an opportunity, we're not good old boying the money somewhere else. And the private sector, maybe the government to some small extent, things like the mayor's racial equity initiative, That's where creating new businesses and new opportunities exist. And now I knew what was going to happen. And whether it was in this equity framework discussion or the procurement issue we have with the economic development department, we're overclocking money to minority owned and black owned businesses right now. We are going over and above for those that exist. And when we look back to the disparity and we say, oh, well, look, what are we supposed to do? You know, we have to find more to give to. No, more need to be created and exist. We're overclocking those that exist. And that's the hard truth of it.
Well, one thing that we saw, I think, with some frequency was the fact that there are a handful of businesses who are great partners of the cities, but we just keep, it's like, oh, well, that's how we can check the boxes, keep going back to the well of these handful of places. And we need to be spreading it wider, not just putting more into a handful of large ones that already exist and are doing well. Continue to work with them, but to your point, we've got to get more businesses created, more businesses registered. There's also undoubtedly a litany of businesses in our community that would be eligible, but just haven't had the help or haven't been pointed in the right direction to get registered to be able to do that work and be considered by the city. So, all right, so we are going to invite on, should be on here in a minute. We'll start our next conversation while she logs on. But we're going to have Dante Anderson on here. And so, as everyone knows, there were two completely new council members who came on, Dante Anderson and Marjorie Molina. Marjorie is going to be on the show hopefully within the next couple of weeks. We're going to have Dante on today. The other two new-ish council members were James Mitchell and Luana Mayfield, both of whom have been on council for a long time, both of whom have been on the show before. But we wanted to have Dante on and Marjorie soon because most of our listeners probably haven't had the opportunity to get to know them, unless maybe you live in their district. Dante represents District 1. She took over the seat that I had previously occupied, and Marjorie took over the District 5 seat, the one that soon-to-be Judge Newton recently departed from.
Judge Newton, that's right. That's coming up, huh?
It was really, I got a kick out of it. I went and early voted on the first day, and you go through the ballot, and there's a dozen judge races. Most of them aren't even contested, and his is not. His is not contested, and so he will be a judge, barring some sort of wild write-in campaign. He will be one of our newest district court judges.
That's exciting. And just on cue, Dante is in the waiting room. Should we bring her on, Larken?
Bring her in.
Let's go. And now,
Dante is holding very still.
We welcome to the program newest city councilwoman from, remember in the thing when
the
I got
most
my
powerful district.
My neighborhood's wrong, Larken?
There's Dante.
Dante, welcome to the program.
Welcome to the pod.
I'm here.
Is that a reggae air horn you just did?
Yes. That's my reggae air horn.
Very nice.
There. What's going on, gentlemen?
Well, we're in the middle of talking about council and politics and stuff. And now actually, this is your first time on the pod, or were you in during the election season? That's right. Larken had already backed away from doing the pod at that point.
We didn't do our candidate interviews like we did last time around this year. So no, first time on the pod. Welcome.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, kind sir.
We want our listeners and our viewers to get to know you. And so, and we got some questions for you.
Okay.
Unpack your first 6 or 7 weeks, whatever it's been on council. But give us like the 3-minute, who is Dante?
Who is Dante? 3 minutes. Okay. Charlotte native, born and raised right here in District 1. I was educated at CMS schools for the majority of my secondary education, and moved away to finish up high school down in Georgia. And I lived in the Northeast for about 20 years, splitting my time between Boston and New York City. Lived in Brooklyn, really loved Brooklyn, and came back here to Charlotte at the end of 2011. In 2011, I packed up my house, I packed up my 2 cars, and I traveled around the world for a year. And that was a fantastic journey. We can talk more about that later, maybe over a beer or a glass of wine.
Were the cars heavy?
They were heavy, man. I mean, I had to get some big guns to be able to lift them up.
It's Don't encourage Tark's dad jokes.
Real quick, we have a very serious question for you. What do you give a sick bird? Some tweetment. We're doing dad jokes.
This is Friday dad jokes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Real questions. Larken, continue.
Yeah.
No, it was Dante that you interrupted, not me.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Whatever.
And so I moved back here at the end of 2011 and thought that maybe I would just be back in the city to just get acclimated. Many of the books that you read around when you're taking these extended trips, they say, go to a space where you kind of ease back into society, where you're not like living out of a backpack and you're not, taking all your stuff around with you. And my whole family's here. They never left. So I was the only sort of prodigal daughter that left and came back and had some closeness with my family. It was great and hadn't lived that close to my family in a while. And just decided that I wanted to stay, really. I got a short-term rental in Dilworth and got reacclimated with the city. And then about 6 months later, I bought a house right down the street. So, so I've been here for 11 years, investing in the community, volunteering, dedicating my time and working in the community, and decided I wanted to take a step into politics. So decided to run for Charlotte City Council, and here I am.
And you won. Tell us about what you do professionally.
Yes, so professionally, I work for Cisco Systems. So I work in IT, and specifically I work in IT within IT. So where all the real nerds are. I hang out with those guys.
Now you're talking Tark's language.
I love it. Let's go. That's great.
Yeah. So for the last year and a half, I've been the chief business officer for Cisco IT, the IT group within Cisco. And that all that means is a lot of fancy words. Basically, it meant I ran the business internally to make sure we were operating efficiently, working on the right projects, prioritizing things, making sure people had the right career pathing, opportunities, career development, et cetera. And just recently actually moved into our chief operating officers group, where I help work on all things culture and community for IT. So how we relate in the communities that we work in from Cisco, but then building out our tech communities internally and creating an environment for our culture and being very intentional about our culture. And the COO at Cisco has IT under her purview. So this is pretty awesome because first time I ever worked, when I worked for the CIO, she was a woman. She was a woman. She still is a woman. She just moved to a different role. And then when I shifted over to the chief operating officer, she's a woman as well. And so she has technology underneath her purview, in addition to supply chain and a litany of other things. So, yeah.
That's crazy. We'll talk about it over beer some other time, but I always find it a very interesting case study for large technology-based organizations where technology reports and the differences between embedded in a business, centralized under a COO, a CTO, a CIO, all has very different pros and cons. And that'll be a good little thing for us to nerd out on sometime.
Absolutely. We can totally nerd out on that.
Do you always have to specify Cisco systems so that people don't think you work for the guy who sang the thong song or work for the company that makes the malt liquor that
nobody thinks that.
One time? No, they don't ever think that you work for the guy who sang thong song?
No, I haven't gotten a thong song mix up, but definitely the Cisco Foods, right? Especially here in Charlotte, because Cisco Foods has a presence here in Charlotte. So people are like, Cisco Food or Cisco?
Are y'all both familiar with Cisco malt liquor?
I'm unfamiliar with Cisco malt liquor.
I know a lot of malt liquors. I can't say I know that one.
I'm going to show it to you now.
Now we're in Larken's sweet spot.
Well, I highly recommend that you never drink this.
Oh, I know what that is. Yeah. That's that old school stuff. There was Cisco and then Mad Dog 2020 and
the MD.
And you want to know the best part? 2 of the flavors are red and orange.
That's
Those are
right.
the flavors. The flavor is red. That's what it says. Red.
That's exactly right. Exactly
Great
right.
commentary, Larken, from one of the most
you.
influential technology companies on the planet to that comment. So thank you.
Yeah. Dong, da, dong, dong, dong.
So anyway, back now to the regular schedule program. Dante, what do you think about the last several weeks of however long it's been on council? I mean, you're my seatmate. You're next to me. I do
Yes.
make a hobby out of trying to make you laugh as much as possible with looks and
Tarek
weird
said he
little
hadn't
tiny
been able-
comments.
Tarek said he
Hey.
hadn't been able to break you yet.
Oh, I've broken her several times, and we're learning sign language together. That's right. So we now have
Oh,
the new sign language.
I thought that sign language was her talking about the magic trick that you
No,
did earlier.
this is that's true. I'll show you the magic trick later. But this we've learned is, I believe, proposal. Because we're just sitting there, bored out of our minds half the time watching the sign language ladies do sign language. But we were going to have this as a segment on the show with just Lark and I, but we'll do it with you. What do you think about our inability to approve a calendar?
Well, the calendar was approved.
Well, yeah, accidentally after a deep audit and recon. Yes, it was.
We're really testing Patrick in his having to go back and figure out all these strange little quirks and nuances.
Yeah. We got to keep Patrick on his toes so his tools will stay sharp. Yeah. Interesting conversation. My positionality. I am one to think that let's try to address what some of the key challenges are and take a stab at making those better. We're not going to get them all the way to bright, on the first take, but let's do that before we just throw more energy, effort, and time at something. And so that's my perspective. And if we just approve something up front without even having any kind of work done as it relates to try and make this better, then there's no incentive to make it better. And that's what I've been sharing with my colleagues. Like, well, there's no incentive to make this better now, right? Because we're just going to throw time and energy at it versus thinking about how we can make it better. So, but yeah, that we had a very interesting council meeting. This last meeting, I think the last 15 minutes of that meeting was like, best of reel for the season here.
It's been rough.
What was the last 15 minutes? We did just before you came on talk some about the equity framework.
Yes.
Is that what that was? Was that the last 15 minutes?
That and then the calendaring, the calendar.
And then council.
He means the last hour and a half.
I was about to say, there's no way that was 15 minutes. And then council members speaking to each other in German and having to be reminded that we need to keep an American English record of the meeting.
That was awesome because I had to, sometimes when you're sitting there
in German Parliament,
listening attentively, and then it's like, wait, what? I don't understand. Oh, that's a different language. Because I'm like, wait, I don't know what words are.
Dante thought she was having a stroke.
Like,
What's going on here?
The sign language lady was like, I give up.
I got nothing. All right, so Dante, first 7 weeks, what's been the best surprise about the job, and what's been the most frustrating part of the job in 7 weeks?
Yeah, the best thing about the job, I think, is a misnomer that like council is always like at each other's neck. My experience for the last 6-7 weeks is that there's an appetite to dialogue and to work together. Now we're coming from different perspectives, so we're not all singing Kumbaya, but I can pick up the phone and call Tariq or Victoria or any of the council members and have a very good conversation. And we're amicable and we speak to the issues. And I think that's great because that gets us to a better answer, right? So I think that's the best thing about being on council. The most frustrating thing about being on council in the last 6 or 7 weeks is the inconsistency of the food that is served.
Well, I gotta tell you, why that is, right? You know why that is.
It's like from here to here, like, whoa, yeah.
I mean, that was one of my promises to my colleagues was I was going to right the ship, and we did for a time. and I hate to see all of that work just being undone.
Well, I can
I'll
put that
talk
on
to
his
somebody.
mailers.
Yeah, I'll talk to somebody. I mean,
Greatest
y'all could
accomplishment.
bring me back as a 10-hour a week food consultant.
Yes, you can be
I
a
will take on that
culinary
role.
advisor. You can be our
Yeah,
culinary
culinary
advisor.
Are you an MWSBE, Larkin? I'm sorry, because now we're gonna have to get back into the equity framework conversation.
I am not.
Okay. So
But he has some subcontractors who are, so it's fine.
absolutely. So I would just comment to your first point. I do think that that's a difference that exists. There's still some old pains and wounds that still exist from the last term, but the last 3-year term, I mean, we went through some brutal times, and I think most everyone is making a real big effort to try to like get back to that amicable nature of where we are right now. And I mean,
Right.
we're still having some debates and stuff, but it isn't anything like the tenor of where we were for the last 3 years. I can tell you.
That's awesome. That's good. And we want to keep it that way. I quite frankly, I do. Right. I want to keep it that way.
I do too. I get tested. Every week I'm getting tested more and more. I'm like, no, this is the new
Are we
Tark.
still talking about council?
Yeah. No, yeah. It's just life in general.
So Dante, you've only got about a year left in this term, even though you just started. So, hopefully you're not going to have a serious competitor running against you next year. Hopefully you get back in there and you're going to have longer than just this first term. But given this first term and how short it is, what's something that you hope the council can accomplish before, and I promise you this will happen, next summer? Everybody's going into campaign mode. City staff starts to pull back from council because of the campaign season.
Yep.
Not a lot gets done, and it's really frustrating because everybody's being asked to do 150 candidate surveys every week and 1,500 candidate forums every week, and
Yes.
you just get distracted. So what can y'all get done in the next 7 months that you've got before everybody goes into campaign mode?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things. One is that I introduced this whole concept of sand rock boulders to my colleagues. I don't know, have they shared that with you, Larkin?
No, I'm not getting briefings anymore. I've been taken off the email list.
Larkin, it's the sand. I'll do the Sandrock Boulder debrief later with you.
There you go. Okay, there you go. But the whole point
One exercise might be asking Tark if he can explain it to see whether he was paying attention or not.
There's boulders. They're the big, heavy things, hard to move. There's rocks. You can move some. There's sand. It's everywhere. It's flowing.
And it gets in your clothes. You can't get it off.
Yeah, exactly.
I hate sand.
But yeah, like that's what I think we need to do. And I don't know that we've had a definitive conversation around it. I think there's been, pockets of conversations here and there after our orientation. But we need to land on what are those 1 or 2 things that we can work on collectively as a council, or what's that one big thing that we can work on, right? I think personally, one of the things we can address is this whole challenge that we have with homelessness throughout the city. But in particular, there are some pockets where it's really bad, and our homelessness population, the unhoused population, have become some of them are maintaining and just trying to get by and build out of that, and some are becoming very aggressive to other constituents in those areas, and there's friction that is occurring, right? And I think if we can put our heads together on how we can work on that, perhaps, of course, in partnership with some of the nonprofit private organizations, but also perhaps, I don't know, maybe with some of our county commissioner, constituents as well, we can make an impression over the next several months. I think that's something we can do. It's doable. I'm not saying I'm going to solve the entire homeless problem in the city, but I think that is something that we can put together a plan and address and move the needle on.
As someone this has been a very large topic and for many years for me, and I've done a lot of different things. I'm certainly very ramped up on it. My gut reaction is there's more than enough empathy in leadership to go around for this. There
Right.
is not even remotely close to the amount of will to do the tough things necessary to balance with that empathy to actually make a solution viable. I think this is one of the most solvable things in the entire city if a mixture of both of those things are available. And there's just, I mean, you've seen, I'm not going to ask you to say yes or no or whatever. You've seen how people pander, right? In this role, in these positions. It's something where when you step out for something you think and know is right, it's not easy. And there's some people that are unable to do it. There's some people that are unwilling to do it. And that's a topic where you have to be willing to go out there and take some arrows and be both empathetic and you know, have the will to do some tough love. And I don't think it exists.
Yeah. And then, you also think about just the importance of Uptown for us, from a commerce perspective, of course, from our corporate citizens, but then the nightlife and the amount of restaurants and activities that occur within Uptown. If we don't have a safe environment up there where people feel comfortable, we're talking about this whole concept of social districts, right? And so fanning outside of bars and restaurants, if we don't have an environment where people feel comfortable late at night, early in the morning, in some of these spaces, they're gonna become larger problems. So I think this is something that we can address as well.
Agreed.
That's my answer, Larken.
What's here's a real and look, I'll open it up for you to take it any route you want because you've been thrown off the deep end into this whole land use rezoning world, but you've seen up front, you've seen me go through some real tough ones. You've seen these broader discussions and how different people fall. You've seen us have a near miss on even doing a rezoning meeting in December because people view it as, why would we do developers a favor? And they don't kind of see the other side of it as this is part of that timeline and overhead that adds 30% of costs to the unaffordability of our housing. So do you have kind of a overall position or at least approach in your mind for how you plan on over the next year kind of approaching rezoning?
I do, yes. And one approach that I'm taking, and I've already done that, is to be prepared when I walk into these meetings. So I've done my homework. I understand what the issues are. I've spoken to the constituents if they are not embracing these projects. And I've also spoken to them as it relates to what they believe the benefits are, right? And having this development occur. So we got to do our homework first. That's, and I know everyone doesn't, feel the same way about homework. And I know that men and women approach homework differently. Did you know that?
Some council members don't do homework at all.
I did not know that. Doesn't everyone just do it in the last hour before class?
No, that's the boys.
They open up their homework
boys.
packet when they get to class.
That's not a boy thing, is it? That's more like an ADD thing.
That is data on that. But anyway, I mean, that doesn't mean that that's, hard lines. But my point is we got to do our homework, right? Secondly, I think we got to look at, and I think we're going to begin to look at this is, what are some similarities and some of these no friction, low friction projects that we can bundle into a consent agenda. We absolutely need to do that, I believe, if it's legal, right? And of course, Patrick's going to make sure that we stay legal on that.
We explored that a little tiny bit in 2017, or at least I did, because I was like, man, we should be able to batch these things up. I don't remember every detail. I remember there were some challenges, but I remember thinking it's possible.
Right.
But I definitely agree with
that. I think legally they probably have to be voted on individually, but you should be able to further expedite the hearings beyond the fact that, it's not the 10 minutes for each side type of thing on a contested one. But yeah, there are some that should just be slam dunks, and there could be a lot of efficiency created in that process and in those meetings in particular if more people came more prepared, having already started asking some of the questions instead of waiting until they get at the dais to launch into some series of questions they could have gotten answered before
Exactly.
they got there.
Exactly. And then the other piece is thinking about like how it fits into our 2040 UDO plan, right? So looking at that holistic approach. I think if we take that three-pronged approach, we can find some efficiencies. I know it might be a little bit bumpy in the beginning, but we have to do something. So that's going to be my personal approach as to how I'm going to address these meetings.
Do you view the developers and the petitioners as kind of the bad guy, as some have started to behind the dais portray them as in the problem right now?
No. We're going to continue to grow as a city. The developers play a critical role in that, right? And to be honest with you, before the UDO really comes into fruition, there's some opportunities that we have to work with the developers prior to that they're going to have more latitude to do once the UDO is fully open. So I found the developers to be very open to dialogue, very open to working in the community, hearing what the community wants, and actually being a partner in that process. So of course not. I don't view them at all as a bad guy.
Not the entire unanimous theme, though, of what's happening right now.
Very true. Very true. I get
Larken?
it.
Well, we are very glad to have you on. It sounded like someone was ringing your doorbell.
It was, but don't worry about that.
Okay. I just wanted to check on that. There's not like someone waiting at your door for you right now.
The point of this is, though, Dante, we have to start figuring out how to take these things, right? And then ultimately magically making them disappear.
Do you just know the one magic trick? Because you've done that 3 times now today.
Yeah, it's just that one.
Have you done that one at the dais?
No, I haven't. I have not done that. I'll do that at the dais.
The trick he usually does at the dais is the one where he shoots himself in the foot.
True.
Right after he dislodges it from his mouth.
Yes.
Who was the basketball player that did that? Do you guys remember that?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
You thinking of Plaxico Burress?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Plaxico. Yeah, from the Giants, right? Yeah.
Can't do that.
Let's just have a firearm in my sweatpants here and go to the club.
I imagine that's what Tariq does when he goes to the club.
It is. It's a big Republican thing to do. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, Dante.
Of course.
Anything else you want to say to the viewers and the listeners?
Oh man, I think we have a great group right on council, around council. You guys are awesome. I just think there's a good camaraderie here that everybody's focused on how to make the city better. So we just got to find that throughput in our various different points of views. But I'm positive that we're going to be able to make some change. That's for sure, and have an impact. And I really enjoy working with both of you. You've been awesome, Larken, in the transition. You have been so awesome just helping me. So I want to say thank you. And I know that we're going to continue to work together, and we'll probably see you on council or somewhere in a very near future, because you are an awesome leader in our community.
Thank you. I'm just glad to have such a good council member representing me in District 1. So
Dante, would you like to say anything nice about me specifically as well?
No, she had her chance. She took a pass on that.
I will take that as a proposal for next time.
You and I will continue to sit next to each other at the dais.
Bingo. Thanks for coming on, Dante.
Awesome, guys. Take it easy. Have a great weekend.
Dante, Councilwoman. So
what do we got left, Tariq?
I think we just we do a
little sports recap. I got my Charlotte FC shirt on, as you can see.
I see that.
And so we've had a good soccer year.
What's on the back of that shirt?
My name,
Egleston.
Good year for Charlotte FC. Good year for the Charlotte Independents. Not great year for football here. We've had Panthers coach get fired. The UNC Charlotte coach just got fired last week, which I hated because he's a great dude.
Listen, if the Panthers win this game on Sunday,
they lead the division.
And
I think the Bucks maybe have to lose or something. But our division is terrible.
The Bucks lost last night.
Oh, that's right.
Brutally.
Our division's terrible. Charlotte sports not a great year, but soccer has been going well.
Can
this
you
year.
imagine getting rid of McCaffrey, all the stuff that's gone on, if these guys made
start
the
winning?
playoffs?
Well, and we got a Charlotte guy in Steve Wilkes coaching, so I would love to see him
my
get a real
premise-
shot at this, because he got kind of screwed over in Arizona.
My premise is always that there's always a chance when like a coach that maybe wouldn't have had a head coaching opportunity, a starting running back who was in the shadow of the number one running back, and then an entire team kind of has what's happened here. All of a sudden, people can come together. They can outperform. They can play for something bigger than maybe they were playing before. And wild stuff can happen. Doesn't mean it will.
Tom Brady wouldn't be Tom Brady if Drew Bledsoe hadn't gone down. So you just never know. And in other good sports news, the Checkers are back in action, and they started out the season undefeated. So
it's
everybody
hockey, man. I really like this sports time of year. Is a fun time when everything starts going like this.
Now, I'm disappointed to say that I missed the opportunity to get one of them, but the tickets are already sold out. Now the secondary market is inflating the values of them. But the Carolina Hurricanes down in Raleigh are going to play one of the outdoor games this year, the Stadium Series that the NHL does, where they play an outdoor hockey game. They're going to play at Carter Finley Stadium, where NC State plays in February.
This is not the big outdoor one. I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do a couple of them a year now.
There's like a major one though.
Yeah, it's that.
It's that. Oh,
yeah.
Dude, let's go to that.
We might need to. We're gonna have to overpay for tickets now, unfortunately.
I'm down with that, man.
What else do we have on the docket besides the now that's been sports?
Yeah. I think we save the you're on the CRVA now on one side of this whole thing. I'm on the city council, the elected people. So there's this whole Uptown thing with the hotel and the convention center. It touches both of our worlds. I think maybe you give
one that kind of went a little off the rails on Monday, didn't it?
The Monday before last, it went way off the rails, and that's because we were doing it in closed session and we were trying to figure it out. So we couldn't talk about it.
Here's the 60-second nutshell, which is for people that are familiar with the Charlotte Convention Center will know that we've just completed a huge renovation there over on the Westin Hotel side. Go to the other end of the convention center, down at the corner of Martin Luther King and College Street. You'll know right now there's a President's Cup mural on a building. There's some fountains down there. But there's a Duke Energy building that's very nondescript. They're out of it now. It's been sold. That's the only piece of that entire block of the convention center that the city doesn't own. It's privately held now. But the city does have a parcel over on Caldwell Street, kind of on the backside of the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So there's a conversation going on now where there would be, and it's going to be a lot of moving pieces, and there's going to have to be a lot of different conversations about how to make the two sides of this deal balance. There's a conversation right now about a land swap that would give the city access to utilize some of that parcel on the convention center property, and give the developer who owns it some of a city-owned land on Caldwell. And there's a lot of other moving pieces, but it would allow for some redevelopment and improvements on that corner, but also a convention hotel that is much needed, according to a lot of these folks who book these big conventions. They're saying we need more hotel rooms, particularly ones that are adjacent or attached to the convention center. There was talk when you and I, maybe early on our time in council, there was some conversations about the city needed to invest in building 1,000-room hotel. There really wasn't much appetite from us on council to do that. But now I think they're looking at it as more of okay, how do we piece together those rooms? And maybe it's 2 500-room hotels, and maybe it's not the level of city investment that had been discussed when we talked about the 1,000-room hotel. But as is the case, it seems like with everything now on council, people see city land and go, oh, I've got an idea for it. And regardless of whether that idea really makes sense
laser
on that
tag
parcel, it's just like, well, wait, I know somebody that would want to do something with that. So how did that end up kind of coming around on Monday?
Well, it was a lot of offline meetings that happened leading up to Monday. And I mean, you can take some things off the table right away. Like there is no scenario by which the highest and best use of either of those properties is like some affordable housing unit structure right now. It's not
simply because the cost of the land is so high that it's completely impractical and would take away from hundreds of other units that can be built in our city.
And not to mention the needs of Uptown, the needs of the convention center. Like they just all like,
But
there are
even
other
if you
places.
take out that part, it doesn't make sense.
Well, so that,
you'd be
while that may
foregoing-
seem like a no brainer, that was the chunk of the conversation for a bit. So you put that aside. I think the other piece that we all agreed on was, okay, you showed us the acreage of each spot and the things that are going to go into figuring out how this doesn't work in a cash transaction, but a swap transaction. And, you know, there's no way we can agree or disagree with that now, but everyone, including myself, is going to be looking very closely at what those numbers of the appraisals end up looking like. So you put all that aside, my big pieces were more strategic in nature. One was, is the best use for this land indeed hotel, which again, we're not building the hotel. We're participating in a land swap where we get it, but we're playing a role in it in some way. Is it a hotel, which some may argue is the supply side of the hospitality and tourism industry, having more supply to be able to do things? Or is it expanding the actual convention center into a third of essentially the puzzle piece that exists there in that plot, which one could argue could increase the demand side? Now, you could argue demand and supply apply to both of those, but we've heard for a long time we need a larger convention center. But we got to the bottom of, we're never going to be like a tier 1 convention center town. Well, you know, we have to play for the sizes and what we have. But so that's question one. My other question is more tactical in nature of, you know, we spent a lot of time and money on the rail trail, and they showed us kind of as an afterthought, this thing kind of looping around and going outside. And I think there's some viable questions to be asked of, why would we not have the rail trail follow the rail through the actual convention center for the experience of it? And I think, you know, we gave staff some takeaways to let us see all that. So there's a lot here, and it's a big deal that we need to get right.
Yeah, and I think there's also a valid question to be asked. I mean, for one, I take the people who are going out and pursuing these conventions at their word, that that's the feedback they're getting is, here's one of the challenges I have with bringing my convention or this convention or whatever to Charlotte is, you know, instead of being able to book everybody at one hotel that's right by the convention center, we've got to work with 2 or 3 different hotels to get the room blocks we need. So that's the feedback they're getting, and I think that need is there. I think the valid question to ask is, how much of a role should the city be playing in creating new hotel competition in Center City when it's the money we use for these types of projects is money that's coming from a self-imposed tax on hotels? So
hugely valid question.
So if I'm a hotel owner and if you rise the tide by making the convention center more active and bigger things, that's going to float all the boats to a degree. But there's also, I think, a challenge for a lot of folks mentally, and I might be one of them, to think, if you're a hotelier, you're paying a tax that's then incentivizing another hotelier to come in and compete with your hotel. So, I mean, that's a tough one, I think, to square too.
Very tough. And I think it's a fair question too, you know?
But the convention center, I mean, we talk all the time about how our airport is an economic engine for our region, not only our city, and it really, obviously it is incredible.
Does Tracy Montross pay you some sort of
every time I say airport?
Airport. She's like, you didn't say airport enough today. What's wrong with you?
I get one more frequent flyer mile. But the convention center really is an economic driver for our Center City. And so we've talked about what does the return to work look like? You know, what is the new normal in terms of people who are going to be in offices 5 days a week or some days a week? We don't know. All of that is still in flux, and I think Uptown needs that shot in the arm. But the convention center is back at, mostly booked most weeks. I mean, there's stuff going on in there every week. That's heads and beds. That's people in restaurants. Having that engine in Uptown for our economy is really almost as big a piece as the office component of people bringing folks back to work. So anything we can do to give that an extra boost, I think, is going to be beneficial for all the businesses in Uptown. So important question, one that we'll both get to weigh in on from different sides of it now, but hopefully people can, I think you've voiced some frustrations in the last week or two about people just taking a position or taking a stance or saying things simply to kind of get credit for it. And again, I think I've seen it with a couple of city-owned properties recently where it's just like people can't resist the urge to say, well, why can't this be
Laser tag.
there's 100 reasons that it can't be certain things, or that certain things make more sense than others. And while I do think, and there's been some work done by staff to sort of catalog all the city-owned properties and identify which ones, there are city-owned properties that are great for affordable housing, and we've found those and we've identified those, and we need to continue to look for those. But that doesn't mean that it's every one. And the idea that you'd put something on land that's worth millions of dollars in the middle of Uptown, sure, you could do it, but you're foregoing 10 times more affordable units that could benefit 10 times more families in other good parts of the community. It just doesn't
We
add
have
up.
to rely on pragmatic kind of strategies, not magic.
For people who are listening, Tariq keeps doing magic tricks, which is, I don't know whether that's incentive or disincentive for you to watch these as videos.
I'll have to go
as
back
opposed
and listen to
it
the
as
audio, see how magic comes off in an audio format.
I'm guessing just as awkward as it does on the video format.
Well, I think we can
I
call
think we're
this
about
one
done here.
quits. What we should do another one in what, 6-8 months, you think?
There's no telling. We do intend to have Marjorie Molina on soon. Hopefully we'll get that done in the next couple of weeks. And you can still somehow we've convinced Tim Boyum to keep letting us come on every single week. You can still catch us on once a week on Spectrum News, Capital Tonight, 7 o'clock every night. We are still weekly guests on there, so you can get your dose of R&D and the QC between podcast episodes. But continue to like, subscribe, share, whatever. I still get at least like one person a week comes up and asks about the pod. So
somebody, if you've listened this long, you're a diehard member, please make one of these Halloween memes that are not hot or cool anymore about Larken.
And Tar.
Larken.
Tech bro Halloween costume.
I bet that already exists.
Comes with neon club lighting for home office.
Okay. I'll give you that one. It was okay. Not funnier than my dad jokes.
Quarter zip sold separately.
I hate you. All right, that's it. Episode 117 in the books.
Later.